So, dann geht es weiter im Programm und als nächsten Vortragenden darf ich Frank Zeppenfeldt nach vorne bitten. Papa Delta 0 Alpha Papa. Herzlich willkommen und ich denke, wir nehmen das Mikrofon hier.
Danke sehr, danke sehr. Ist das okay, auch mit den internationalen Teilnehmern, wenn wir das auf Deutsch machen? Auf Englisch, meine ich. Ist das okay? Ja? Yeah, maybe okay. If that's okay with you, we do it in English, because yesterday we had a number of people that are maybe non-German speakers. Very quickly, we'll give a quick update on an initiative that we started to at least get to a design or some ideas about a future QO100. Let's say we learned there's enough fuel left, but maybe it's good to think already what could be done later on. Now, we have a small project. I'm from the satellite telecommunication part. I'm not from the educational part of ESA, so we have a bit more, more commercial view maybe on certain things. And we have reserved some funding to at least play around a bit, get some ideas on the table how a future payload in geostationary orbit could look like. And it was actually inspired by a lot of maybe firsts that were achieved by the satellite community, by the amateur community. We collected a number of the, let's say, the firsts that the satellite community did, like flying maybe the first DVB-S2 Ka transmitters, the first GPS in higher orbits, the first CMOS chips. These were all, let's say, achievements where the amateur community was far ahead of the commercial world, and that spinned off later on in commercial applications. So it's quite nice achievements, and it would be nice also if the amateur world keeps also that spirit of taking risks, doing very fancy things, because we have to be honest also at the moment on Q100, there are also a number of things being done which are already done by the commercial world. Still there are aspects of innovation, but we would like to push that a bit. And we do that with some, let's say, limited funding to look at the next payload. And this started actually already 2 years back. We asked IARU, the boss of IARU, let's say, to send a letter to ESA, basically with a kind request. ESA, could you set aside a bit of funding to look into the design of a future payload? We asked our countries, because in the end, we are spending taxpayers' money. Are you okay with that? And of course, the countries that we have to say, yeah, it's all okay, but a bit with focus on the European and the Canadian amateurs, because that's where the taxpayers' money goes. Nevertheless, we're open for any international collaboration. And concretely, we reached out to AMSAT Germany to get a few things running. So, where are we now? Is this pointer? Yeah. So we would like the amateur community to look at something which is benefiting European, Canadian, but with international collaboration. And we wanted to consolidate the requirements from the amateur community, trade off several payload options, and address the future user segment. Maybe I'll indicate a bit here. You see here AMSAT Germany. So we set aside a bit of funding, and that was actually done in the workshop yesterday. So we can be completely transparent about the financials also. We give 70,000 euro to AMSAT Germany to get a few things running. And then we have something like 180,000 euro left to do all kind of stuff which we think is useful to get further to payload design or prototyping and so on. Now, we are so in these first 3 points that you see here. And this could go from a very simple analog transponder to something which is super complicated, very high bands, all kind of ideas come to the table, large language models on the satellite, talking Dutch up with French automatically coming down like your iPod, whatever. Let's say if you have a big fat Linux box in Geo, you could do anything actually. But maybe that's too complicated, and maybe things also get too centralized and so on. That is actually the discussion that we should have. What should a payload achieve? What kind of mission are we really pursuing? Now, yesterday we started already collecting the, let's say, the results of Q100, because if we want to also collect financing for a next payload, we need to justify why this Q100 was so useful. And it turns out a lot of outreach, and I guess we'll hear more about that today, was achieved. A lot of companies have done interesting technical experiments over Q100, which in the end spinned off commercial products also. We also heard about, let's say, increased sales, which is also a good thing. We heard more Plutos have been sold, etc., etc. The POTI, there's small companies that make the 3D printed things. So that's a very good thing for, let's say, in general, satellite industry. Now, this is now going on. And yesterday, there was a very nice workshop. We'll show you some pictures later on. All kind of ideas came on the table, and they were collected under the leadership of AMSAT Germany. But it needs a bit of refinement. Let's go through a few. There is a few, of course, frequency bands. That's very important. Some people would like to drive up. On the other hand, it might become more difficult and less inclusive for people. And maybe you get narrower beam. Phased array things come back to a lot. Maybe simple phased arrays to experiment. In the spirit with the analog devices, phaser, and you maybe follow a bit some of those videos from analog devices. Reverse beaconing to check the quality, to do early tests. Also maybe having a small camera in GEO to connect maybe an environmental purpose, or it helps in also engagement with the community, maybe combined with IoT sensors. Now various ideas are put on the table. LoRa comes in, also links through related to the improved synchronization or reference clocks to do maybe more accurate ranging and so on. So this needs to be looked at, but also there are a few questions raised. Let's say, are we staying with a, let's say, big fat commercial GEO, and there is, let's say, a 10 kilogram amateur payload? In the meantime, like the Epic Aerospace, they will launch soon also something very quick to GEO, so real GEO. There's so many new opportunities popping up to have satellites in GEO orbit with space tugs, also on top of, let's say, the Falcon Heavy and so on. The first 16 new CubeSats are in GEO. So there's enormous amount of new opportunities beyond just a commercial satellite from an operator. And that would make us very independent, but maybe also less power. And of course, far more responsibility to actually operate an amateur payload, an amateur satellite in GEO orbit. Now, all this needs to be processed, and we'll discuss later on what the next steps are. Maybe, Jens, I think you had some pictures just to give an impression of the workshop yesterday. Yeah, there's maybe I'll also walk past Peter, because I honestly forgot the name of the moderator, but maybe you can.
Jens, sorry.
Yeah.
Thilo.
Okay, the moderator, Joe. Der Moderator for all the people ist Joe Hecker. Joe Hecker ist Wissenschaftsjournalist beim Westdeutschen Rundfunk gewesen. Joe Hecker arbeitete für die Stiftung Haus der kleinen Forscher und ist aktuell für das Goethe-Institut unterwegs und erklärt weltweit, wie MINT-Bildung, also Bildung für technische, naturwissenschaftliche Bildung funktioniert. Und der Joe war einfach die taugliche Person, um hier als Dritter aufzutauchen und nicht im Gegensatz zu uns irgendwie vorgefärbt das Ganze zu managen. Und ich glaube, es war der richtige Weg.
Good, thank you, Thilo. Maybe next picture. So you see the setting with remote participants, with various tables talking about payload, some about user segments, some about, let's say, the mission itself. So that was quite an interactive period. Next, please. And you can see here also from the remote participants proposing all kind of topics. They will be collected all and processed. And good. And this is a bit the conclusion, clustering the various topics, discussing those. Good, and these were the physical participants. We had actually quite some people missing because of the strikes in certain countries. And, yeah, okay, maybe if you could be so kind to switch back to the other one. And, good. Next steps. So back to the work that we contracted to AMSAT Germany. We would expect that before the end of this year, we have well-documented lessons learned of Q100 that say, why is it a useful thing for the community? What did we learn? And so on. And that should provide also a justification for a next mission. We also expect that there are 3 or 4 missions or technical concepts, maybe there are combinations possible, that are documented, justified, and let's say a top-level design is made for that. So at the block diagram level, link budgets, etc. And also we would like, and we will support that, we need a plan how to approach maybe a future opportunity. This could be, of course, completely ad hoc, that suddenly something comes available. We had that a year and a half ago, actually. We missed that opportunity because there was something available, and we didn't have anything on the table at that moment. So we would not like to miss such an opportunity. So a plan how to approach the satellite operators and also the prime contractors who normally receive the RFPs. And then during 2026, as mentioned, we have quite a bit of funding left for this project, so we could do, if necessary, some early prototyping, prove some concepts, but also advocate and lobby, approach, maybe bribe, blackmail satellite operators to embark, or maybe as part of their social corporate responsibility. You know, very much of these multinationals have beautiful pages about social and corporate responsibility, sustainability goals, etc., etc. Now, maybe with this they could really help in getting young people and also help their workforce for later. Good, I think this completes it. This is a small update. Hopefully at, let's say, at Ham Radio 2026, updates will be presented, because now it's time to keep a bit of momentum actually in that. I think this is all I want to say. I don't know if some of the international participants wanted still to add a few words, things I forgot from yesterday, or people that were there yesterday. Otherwise, this was a bit of a small update on this GEO project. Any questions? We're happy to answer. Please, Michel.
Do you have the next workshop or meeting or conference planned yet?
No. Michel from ORI is asking whether there is a new workshop planned already. Not yet, I would say, not a planning. I would say I consider this still part of the Amsterdam Germany tasks of the things that we fund to organize that, advertise that, etc. Ja. Gut, andere Frage auf Deutsch, auch kein Problem. Ja. Gut, dann bitte.
Okay, ja, vielen Dank, Herr Zeppenfeldt, vom ESA, European Space Agency. Und ich denke, was wir hier gesehen haben, das ist AMSAT Future. Das ist was ganz, ganz Tolles. Und vielen Dank. Ich habe noch ein Präsent für Sie. Ich darf Ihnen das geben.
Ja.
And these chips are for lunch. Okay, thank you.
Okay.